Hi Taylor, here's the second question, and you're being asked for the slope of the tangent for this equation, and they give you x equals 1 and y equals 1. So I'm just not sure, there's a couple of different ways for you to write the derivative, and I'm not sure in your class how you're doing it. Sometimes when you're doing the derivative you use dy dx, and sometimes you use y prime. Those are the two most common ones. I'm going to use y prime. I'll show you what I mean in a minute, because we're doing implicit differentiation here, because we've got two different variables to differentiate. And so I think probably that your professor is using y prime for the derivative, and so I'll use that every time we take the derivative of y, okay? So let's go back over to the question, and the first thing we can do is we can rewrite the ln y squared as 2 times the ln of y. You just bring the 2 in front and multiply it. It's one of the properties of logs and lns, okay? And then we have minus y ln y equals x minus 1. So taking the derivative of all of these terms, every time we take the derivative of a y term, we have to multiply by y prime, because the y is not defined according to x. We're taking the derivative of y with respect to x, but we don't have an equation that says y equals 3x or something like that. So whenever we do these types of problems, they're called implicit differentiation. Whenever I take the derivative, so here I've got 2 ln y, I'm going to take the derivative, because the derivative of ln y is 1 over y, so that would be 2 times 1 over y. I also have to multiply times y prime, and that's because it's not an x, it's a y, okay, and it's not defined according to x. So we'll go back and we'll work with that in a minute. Now the next one, this term here is a product rule, because we have two variables being multiplied. We have the negative y times the ln of y, so I have to use product rule. So the derivative of minus y is minus 1, and then I need to multiply that by ln y, and then I have to multiply the derivative of ln y, which is 1 over y, by negative y. And whenever I'm taking the derivative of the y, oh dear, I forgot. Hold on. Erase that, back up for a minute here. For all my fancy talk, I totally forgot. So minus 1 is the derivative of y, and then we need to multiply it by y prime before we multiply by ln y. And then I'm going to take the derivative of ln y, which is 1 over y, and we need to multiply that by y prime, and then multiply by minus y for the product rule. On the other side, we have the derivative of just 1x, and so that's easy, it's just 1, and the derivative of minus 1 is 0. So I've got all this big mess. I've got 3 terms, this one, and this one, that all have a y prime in them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to factor out the y prime as a common denominator. And in the first term, I'll have 2 over y left over. In the next term, I'm going to have negative ln y left over. And in the third term, I'm going to have negative 1 left over. And so when I want to solve this equation for y prime, because I'm trying to find the first derivative, I'm going to take this whole bracket and I'm going to write it on the other side in the denominator. Okay, so I'm dividing everything by this whole bracket. So now it's time to substitute in our value. Remember way back here they told us that x equals 1 and y equals 1. So if I want to find the value of y prime, because that is m, right, that's our slope, then I'm going to fill in y equals 1, and I'm just going to draw an arrow up here, and we're just going to fill in on the same screen here. So the slope, which is y prime, is 1 over 2 minus the ln of 1. So the ln of 1 means that e to the exponent something has to give us an answer of 1, and the only time that can happen is when the exponent is a 0, right? E to the 0 always equals 1, and so that middle term equals 1, and then we have a minus 1. So if we simplify that, we have 1 over 2 minus 1, or 1 over 1. So therefore, the slope equals 1. Some questions might ask you to then find the equation of the tangent. And if you were doing that, then you would have to put everything that you know into y equals mx plus b. And so in this case, you would have y equals 1, m equals 1, x equals 1, and b equals, we don't know. And so this equation is 1 equals 1 plus b, so obviously b equals 0, and that would give us an equation of y equals x for the tangent line to this curve. Okay? So I hope that helps. Keep sending me questions if you come across stuff that you're having trouble with, and I'll keep checking it all weekend.